All right, thank you everyone. This is our first panel of the day, and we're going to be discussing, let's say, the future of cinema, location-based entertainment, and location-based includes both the real and the physical and the virtual location. But I just want to, because we've only got half an hour, I'm going to do intros of everyone on the panel, just to move it along. So I'm Phil Lelyveld. I run the VR AR initiative at the Entertainment Tech Center. To my left, your right, is Greg Ciaccio, who is entertainment technology evangelist and managing partner at Redesign Group. Then we have Richard Taylor, who's the founder of iMerse. Then we have, Greg Downing, president of XRES. And then Ted Schilowitz, the futurist at Fox. So if we can just jump into it, because we're thinking about the cinema, the multiplexes, and also any sort of location-based thing. But if you were to look at theaters today as they exist, what could you enhance about them using technology or new tools of storytelling to make the existing infrastructure more appealing to the audience? And Richard, let me start with you, if I can.
Well, pretty much everything. Theaters, projection is Edison-era technology. We are moving into new ways of imaging. My particular group, Immerse, is we are creating a new entertainment format that is polarized or active LED that replaces screens. So I will pretty much guarantee you within the next 8 to 10 years, theaters will replace projection with high-resolution LED that's polarized, so that you can, and the difference between that is projection, you run out of light very quickly. You only see about 100 nits on the screen. With LED, you start with 1,700 nits, and the black is black. There's no limit to the frame rate or the resolution. So it's going to change everything. Mm-hmm. Now, the theater does not need to remain a proscenium-based design. We are actually creating an environment that totally surrounds you, so that you have three-dimensionality totally around you, and you have stuff in Z space or in negative space that comes up totally around you because there's no edge violation.
Yeah, because of the 3D.
So that's a little hint.
So let me jump to Ted, because you're involved with the Barco Escape. So how is that going, and where do you think the space itself is going?
Sure, yeah, it's going well, and it's essentially a stepping stone to what Richard's talking about. It's a 3-screen immersive cinema experience. The first studio partner was Fox. Most recently, we did a project with Paramount, Star Trek Beyond, which launched last summer, this summer, and was highly successful in about 30 cinemas around the world. Next week, I'm in Vegas for CinemaCon, which is the largest exhibitor show of the year, and all the studios show their wares, and we'll be there showing that. And it's an interesting stepping stone towards looking at what the future of cinema can be, might be, and the steps that we all take as creators, auteurs, evangelists, technologists to start moving the ball forward past those Edison days, past the days of someone hung a bed sheet and said, there you go, that's the movies. And that's essentially stayed the same way for quite a long time. And other forms of entertainment have essentially surpassed it quite effectively from a technological standpoint. So one of the things that I think about in my role at Fox is what is the evolution of the cinema experience, and do what we call movie theaters start to become entertainment centers and start to look at shaving into the world of theme park entertainment. And now when you're talking about using headsets, AR, VR, different styles of immersion, new forms of technology, you start to begin to understand spatial entertainment, which was the domain of a theme park, where you could move around inside something, in a ride vehicle, or just walking or experiencing something. And now technology allows us to put it on our head and connect the dots that way. And who knows where it'll all go, but the smartest exhibitors in the world are taking a very experimental, a very forward-thinking approach to seeing what they need to do to actively engage new audiences for their entertainment choices.
Okay. The two Gregs, Greg 1 and Greg 2. Do you have anything to add to this? for everyone?
Yeah, actually, very much like what Richard said and Ted. We envision an environment theatrically that is well beyond what you get today. There's some great systems out there by Dolby and IMAX. However, you can only get to, let's say, 108 nits. And so many of us feel the future is going to be in immersive displays. So if you look at either the way they currently exist or even thin film type displays that are very flexible, very you can put them anywhere. It depends on the environment. You can have them in different shapes. And at that point, the only way to get the real reality out of it is having high dynamic range, high frame rate. And these things don't have standards these days at that level. It's got to be very high resolution. And imagine, I'm a big fan of the what I call the extended arena. So you've got concerts, you have sporting events. Every person is sitting in those seats. It'd be nice to be able to be in an environment like that and use those theaters for things outside of just theatrical storytelling and be able to actually have people not only in those seats experiencing it, but imagine on a replay if all of a sudden you're first person. You could put a camera in a helmet, and it's going to happen, and you can basically see the quarterback throwing the ball and the receiver catching the ball on a replay.
Okay.
I've been following all these trends too, and I get really excited about the high dynamic range projection, getting colors on screen that we've never seen before. We can get saturation with laser projection that you've literally never seen on a screen before. And that's all incredibly exciting, along with the frame rates and really good stereo for the first time. But I think with all of these changes, another thing that comes with all of that is it changes composition. When we went from black and white movies to color movies, all of a sudden you were thinking about color all the time, and it changed the way that you would compose a film. And I see that happening and coming rapidly at us from multiple directions as all these new technologies are getting introduced. So something that I think about quite a bit is what does it mean when you're doing composition for framed media, where you use the frame as your main compositional element, or driving force, and then you switch to a spherical environment for VR, or a full 6 degrees of freedom space. Like, how does that change composition? For instance, with the laser projectors and saturation, most of our movies are not really recording those colors. The first ones to do it will probably be animated films, because it's really easy to just flip the switch and get it. But that will change the way we compose, and I think all of these changes will have impacts on that. That's something we got to work out along the way as we're building these technologies.
Greg Downing, let me ask you about that, because you've done a lot of work in large format, right?
Mm-hmm.
IMAX, things like that.
Yep.
How is that different from normal cinema?
I think it's wildly different, and probably on the even a little further than IMAX, you've got full dome media, which the full dome theaters have been around for at least a dozen years. And in full dome, you've got to do a lot of work to redirect your audience, because again, you don't have that frame. You have an edge, you have a bottom edge, but that's all you've got. You've got one edge that you can use. But a lot of the things that people talk about in VR, about using sound to direct people, using leading lines, using other types of elements other than framing. And to my experience, whether you're talking about stereo photography, you're talking about full dome film and VR, they all require separate compositional, they have different compositional requirements to make something good in each media.
Yeah, Richard.
Well, I would agree. First of all, everything about telling something in 3 space is more like theater in the round. It's like being in this room. What I'm talking about is an entertainment format where there's photoreal dimensionality totally around you, photoreal human beings at real human scale that can be driven in real time by mocap and facial mocap, as was done at GDC for Hellblade. But it's the holodeck in a sense. But you can, when you have a 3-dimensional space wherever you look and it's dimensional around you, not with an HDM where you're looking through a window at a world around you. And by the way, that is not immersive. This is immersive. So when you create these new environments, you can focus, as we always do in directing and entertaining, where we want the audience to look, as the previous speaker was discussing. But the 2 places generally you never look are right there and right there. And to tell stories up there, I mean, if you're in an underwater environment that would make some sense. But in general, you sculpt it for what you need. It's more like theater in the round. A close-up in this room is not cutting in as we do in film, it's you being close to me. So everything about storytelling is different, and that's why seeing a lot of traditional theater and musicals and things like that, transitions, but you can float a picture right there in front of you like a traditional movie if you want. So anything that existed previously still exists, but we have these other new holodeck kind of places we can go.
So we're talking about theaters as the dark room. A multiplex has a lobby, it's got a snack bar, it's got restrooms, it's got aisles, and the theater owner wants to make money. And there's also social media and reaching out to your community. What ideas do you have, again, using the existing infrastructure? Have you thought about how new media, including VR and different formats, could be used to basically extend the experience and make it more of an attractive destination for a new generation? And I guess we can go down the line. It looks like everybody's nodding.
Yeah. There's no reason why you can't have an AR experience in a theater, right? So you've got a screen, and you could have, just like many people have donned 3D glasses, you could have an overlay there that gives you information about what's going on, and at that point, it's not as comfortable as an HMD. You can even donate to a cause if you're producing empathic videos. If you're doing a documentary, there's no reason why you couldn't get more information on something you care about and actually donate directly through a system if it's tied correctly to financials. It has to be worked out, of course. There's a lot of hurdles there, but there's no reason why it can't happen.
Okay. Yeah, Richard.
Well, in our format, basically all media that exists now will still play there. And one of the things is to take all the VR games, which there's much more that, when you're looking through a VR, you're looking through a window, so you don't have negative space happening because you have constant edge violation. But basically, being able to play video games that you've played before with the same controllers, only now you see the whole environment instead of just that window. Streaming, so you could go to Burning Man and be sitting on your couch, and not like Greg here who goes out and gets really dirty. But basically, it's a total media format that allows you to mix and match whatever you want. So just watching a traditional film, you can have it floating there and put yourself in a 1930s theater if you're watching, Casablanca.
Can you see putting that in the lobby as a pre-show?
Yes, you could put the sim in there. And by the way, they're all connected, so you could be in one where you are and I'm in another, and we can interact and play new kinds of gambling games or interactive games. But another thing is that we're creating polarized LED and active LED. So polarized LED, you're wearing glasses that are 20 ND. You walk into an environment, this room, those walls or whatever we want to be are 1.2 millimeter polarized LED, and they are dimensional and real at whatever you want it to be. So you can interface this dimensionality with architecture.
Right, and for those who don't remember 3D, the polarized ones were the cheap ones that you threw into a bin. Okay. Yeah.
The theater is a place that's going to be very exciting as all of the destination immersive experiences start to kind of expand into that. There's obviously lots of room to take a franchise and expand it. Disney's been the master of that on all of their titles, for decades. So I see that as a very fruitful territory where maybe you explore something about the film that you're about to see. But I really don't think that framed media is going anywhere. I don't think it's going to supplant what you see when you go into the theater. But I think that as a method for exploring, that it's I think of what you do in the when you have 6 degrees of freedom, and that you can interact when you add the interaction. It's much more. It's much less of a guided experience, like a movie I think of as a guided experience, and it's much more of an exploration. So it's another way to experience the same type of media and kind of get pulled more deeply into the story. And that's what I find really exciting now, whether that happens through LEDs mounted on the wall or headsets. I think that those are open questions. That the headsets I immediately have some concerns about. Just you can't get that many people through a headset, in an hour. You can't turn around and talk to your friends easily in a headset. So I think there's some things that need to get solved as far as like social interaction across these experiences. whether in a headset or projected or on LED panels. So I think there's some problems there that really need to be solved to make this work well, but also just throughput, just getting people through the space.
Okay, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, obviously throughput is a continual challenge when you talk about anything in a location-based world. So everyone here sort of talked about the content dynamics and thoughts about that. I'll take it in a slightly different direction, which I also think is very valid, is if you think about movie theaters all around the planet and how human nature relates to the movie theater experiences and how people choose to use a theater, they're empty almost all the time. In the West, in the countries here, 85% dark, sometimes 90% dark, right? You have nights, weekends, weekend days, and then the rest of the time is empty. Contrast that to the theme park world, where they have figured out, and of course they have softer times and busier times, and it's seasonal, but their goal is to always drive traffic at all times of the year and every day of the year, right? 365, maybe they take a day off, but most of the big ones don't even do that, right? You're always trying to make sure you can capture a valid audience. So the biggest thing to maybe think about when it comes to the evolution of the cinema is how do you deal with all that dark time, and can you create a different style of creative experience that makes people think about this more like going to a theme park, but that they could go to a theme park where they could travel 30 minutes and spend 4 or 5 hours in a theme park dynamic versus once or twice a year if you're lucky, and the normal average person once every 2 or 3 years if they can afford it, right? So I think when you start to glue all that stuff together with all the technology that's out there and all the ways that people can attack this, again, the smartest exhibitors and the smartest purveyors of this technology will start to experiment with this. And one of the things that we're seeing in LA is the IMAX folks are experimenting with an IMAX VR center with all the throughput challenges, but what we know is that that's not their concern, right? Their concern is to keep driving towards something which will make an audience say, instead of committing for 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. on a Saturday night, they're going to commit from 1 in the afternoon till 8 at night. And that changes the economics of that real estate. You can sell more concessions, you can do more things, you can do multiple experiences, and you can charge enough to keep that going. So then you can rejigger the throughput challenges that way of the different newer media. And as over time, all of those throughput issues will get solved as people literally will walk in with their own technology to a place that can fire it up. And then you solve those in different ways. So these are sort of these futuristic kind of concepts that I'm always working on and experimenting with.
Right. Richard.
Yeah, I would like to agree with Ted on several things. One is that theaters are primarily empty, and all the evolution of laser projectors and everything has not actually changed the attendance. The improvements in projection has not really changed. We have to create a new dynamic in that theater. And one of the things that I was just speaking about is negative space imagery, so that as we're sitting here in the theater, literally we could be underwater with fish swimming around us, a shark could come up to us, there could be water, we look under and above, that we're immersed in it, and we're there with an audience. And that social part is a big part that is missing with the headsets, as we all know. And whether it's the Void in New York or whatever it is, you got to put a headset on people, a backpack, put them through, clean them. It's difficult. And I think there's such a need driven by people who really enjoy going to a comedy with other people. I mean, a comedy by yourself is not anything like a comedy with a laugher in the crowd, right? So, but it's that reopening up the social aspect of it and creating a new visual dynamic that really can change.
So I just want to riff off something that Greg Downing said, which is the frame won't be supplanted. So, and what we were just talking about, we've got the Void spaces, Dreamscape is coming into Century City, zero latency. If you, and think of multiplexes as basically real estate plays with an entertainment overlay. So if you were a Cineplex owner and you could just do a reconfigure of the building, what would you put in it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what we touched upon, right? Is can you put in a bunch of different style experiences that will appeal to different audiences, right? And can you have interactive sections and areas? And the old school version of what does a cinema do to hold an audience a little bit longer or maybe get them to spend another 20 or 30 minutes at their physical location is they park an arcade in the front corner of the cinema with a bunch of stand-up consoles. And they have done that for years, right? But as the home experience gets so sophisticated and so good, people's home experience is better than going to the arcade. So that becomes an edge case. It doesn't become really an economically viable part. Where we see what's interesting about VR, to all those reference points that you make about Dreamscape, which we're an investor in at Fox, and The Void, which we're very close to, and all these other companies that we continue to sort of explore and see where they're all going, is the logic point of what can you offer that eventually will become widespread home-based entertainment and give people their first touch on, and give people maybe their second or third touch on, that they're starting to be willing to say, I see what all those people are talking about now. Like, I went under the ocean. I killed a bunch of zombies. I went through an immersive storytelling experience before or after I went to a movie, and it rounded out my entertainment day, and I told my friends about it, and they all wanted to come. And it actually serves multiple masters, right? Because we all know in this audience, a sophisticated audience, that the home-based media pie is exceptionally large, right? What people are spending to entertain themselves in the home. It is much, much larger than what people spend theatrically to go out of the home to do things. But the theatrical part of that, in any format, in any stage of let's go see a movie, let's go to a theme park, let's go play games outside of the home, is a way to test and learn about what is going to be successful in the home and see what will catch on to people's imagination, right? So again, the smartest exhibitors are learning to experiment with new forms of entertainment, and they're not afraid to put things in that can actually allow that to happen.
That's actually been the history of entertainment. Hollywood
Yeah.
invents something, and then when it catches on, it becomes a consumer product, and we have to invent the next
reinvent
thing
the thing,
to stay ahead. Any other comments on that? Because I think because we need to fit yours in, because the wall, it's going to be a long time before that wall goes into someone's home, right? The immersive experience.
Well, when you say the wall, I mean,
Well, it could be
initially
a dome.
what we were creating is a total environment that surrounds you, a cylinder that can be capped. Because when the surface itself is making the light, you don't have to worry about occlusion. We don't have to have a perfectly rounded space for the shader to say, oh, look, this is infinity. So there's ways of creating illusion.
Right, but I'm not building that in my house.
No,
Right.
but as the pitch of the LEDs go down, it can go down to 5 feet in diameter, it can go down to 6 feet in diameter, it could be desktop.
So it could go into retail
Well, but
stores.
AR glasses, when they get sophisticated enough and come to the market, now we're talking in the next sort of 5 to 10 years of
Right.
Yeah.
cycling technology, will allow that to happen. Will allow you to take any environment that you're in, whether that's your kitchen, your living room, your playroom, your rec room, and turn it into any environment that you want. And as technology continues to progress, the illusion, per what Lucas was referring to, the illusion gets better and better and better, to the point where it's hard to discern, is it really happening or not happening? And then you're at a whole nother threshold of what entertainment does. And then it's an interesting question as to what do all the purveyors of out-of-the-home entertainment need to do to stay ahead of that curve, right? So it's this constant battle of technology that's portable, transportable, viable in a home environment or an office or any kind of productivity or entertainment environment. Compare that to what do people do out of the home. And I think a lot of what will happen is that the out-of-the-home experience will be the learning center for eventually what you will get in your home. And the people that do it the most will be the most interested in buying the things for their home. So it actually serves multiple economic trees, essentially.
Greg Ciaccio, I cut you off twice.
No, just real quick, look at what, when the Wii came out, right? So you had Sony PlayStation, you had Xbox doing high definition, right? And all of a sudden the Wii comes out, it's standard F. And people are, what, making a standard F console? But look at the experience.
But you could bowl in your living room.
Look at the experience, yeah. Why couldn't you have an entire wall full of that and basically play not just your sister in the same room, but your best friend in New York?
That's right,
Okay,
that's right.
Greg?
Oh, I just had a thought earlier about when we were talking about how theaters are empty most of the time, and if we fill it with the right technology, maybe we can increase that. The other exciting part about that is that it opens the door for all kinds of new content that wasn't seen, maybe because you don't want to dedicate that theater on a Friday night. You're going to make all your money off of the top movies, but during the week that you might have other smaller special interests where that would garner a large enough audience to fill the theater, that you can bring in and just replace that media.
Yeah, that's right.
And
So people are constantly mixing with that chemistry, right?
Exactly.
Well,
So you
That's
see
what's
things like
exciting.
Fathom events and operas and things that
Well, streaming.
touch a smaller audience.
Yeah, streaming operas, sporting events of all kinds are being streamed now to headsets, but when it's much more photoreal, much higher quality, so that you can have an audience there for a NASCAR race, be there for the
Yeah, I think
Daytona
it
500.
was 2 weeks ago that the Mets opera was number 9 at the
Yeah,
box
it
office.
starts to happen.
But
That was
like
just normal.
in Las Vegas, they're dealing with this problem, and the millennials don't like to play the traditional gambling games. They haven't learned them. They don't know them. They're used to things that are visual and so forth. So these new slot machines that are real visual, they all kind of tend to that. So if you create any kind of new gambling environment that's dimensional, that a three-space version of pinball or anything else, and we're connected, you're in Vegas and I'm in Monte Carlo, and we play each other, that's what's coming.
So we're forming virtual locations.
Yes.
The location-based
You see the
entertainment.
first steps of that now in Vegas. I have to go to Vegas for work a lot, so I see these things. And you'll see these very large 4K screens where they'll put a virtual blackjack dealer for people that are intimidated by actually sitting in front of a real human.
Yeah.
And there's always a crowd, and there's always people, and it's basically the same as playing in the old-fashioned, poker or blackjack sort of button machine, but they've actually sort of done a pseudo-augmented version. And again, the minute I see that, thing that I think about is eventually when you have augmented glasses and you can just sit down in any environment and you can have a real dealer who's interacting with you and reacting with you, then it doesn't even have to be in a real casino. You can take it anywhere, right? So already in the Gear VR and mobile, there's a virtual poker room. And people will sit down with their avatars and play poker together.
And if you get too close to them, you disappear.
Yeah,
Right.
that's interesting, kind of compelling.
Right. So you've all articulated a view of the future, multiple views of the future, and this is virtual NAB. And NAB is a group of professionals, if you will. So what message would you each give them? What should they learn? What should they think about? What should they know about? I'd like you each to comment based on what you've heard here and what you've talked about. Do you want to start?
Keep your eyes and ears and mind open. Don't look at just the traditional a way to solve a problem that currently exists today. Think of what's next.
Well, I think good storytelling, as the previous speaker, that never can be beaten. Learning the Unreal Engine, learning the basic tools that are out there now for making 3D CG elements, but also learning about the virtual cameras, the newest Jaunt and so forth that we could hang in this room, shoot it, go into a sim, boom, we're here. So learning the new tools, but and read Dan Block's book on how to frame and how to compose imagery, because it's theatrical. It's changing from being a rectangle to being an environment. So go to the theater a lot. Go see plays and musicals with real people on stage. Go see Cirque du Soleil or Love.
I would say mostly learning more about 3D space for an NAB crowd. And there are lots of games out there, but think about what more we can do with the same tools if they're not games, if there are other types of experiences. And interactive films has been lots of experiments done over the years and very few successes. But if we're thinking about them as something other than a film, other than a fully guided experience, I think there's a lot of potential.
Okay. And Ted?
So Richard touched on it a little bit, and I, as you know, Phil, give a lot of talks, and I often am asked to give this kind of advice, and I sort of drive it to a bit of practicality about if you're interested in what's new in entertainment, then don't just come to conferences and listen to people talk. Be prepared to make a relatively modest investment in technology and time to actually do the things that you think you might be interested in. So what I've said, and I've said this many times to audiences very large and all over the world, is if you're at all interested in VR today, AR in the future, if you're interested in immersive cinema, if you're interested in anything that breaks out of the frame, that goes beyond the rectangle, then if you are not an owner of a VR tethered headset in your home, go out and get one. It's going to mean about a $1,500 to $2,000 commitment, realistically, to do that. If you're not an owner of a mobile VR headset, go out and get one. You can get a Daydream, you can get a Samsung, cheaper things that you can put your iPhone in, the cardboard stuff. Just start somewhere. And the trick is try and do something in this new media realm every single day. Just like I guarantee you watch television probably every single day, and those of us that work in the movie business watch movies multiple times a week. You need to be doing VR today, AR in the near future, at least 3 or 4 times a week now to keep up, to start to remove some of the blind spots, to start to actually be able to have real valid conversations with your coworkers and your peers about what's actually happening in this media. So very often I see people come to conferences, they'll spend money, they'll get on airplanes, they'll buy tickets to hotels, they'll sit in rooms, and then I'll ask them, when was the last time you were in VR? And the last time they'll say, well, I was in a conference a month ago, and that's the last time I saw VR. I said, you need to be doing it a lot more than that. You need to be literally doing this almost every day. And at this point in my world, if you're really working in the industry in some fashion, you need to be wearing some sort of headset every single day for at least an hour a day and doing stuff in it. Just like anybody that worked in the TV business would say, if you said the last time I watched TV was a month ago at a trade conference, that would be a problem, right? You wouldn't really know about television. So if you really want to know about these new media areas and art forms and all the different things that come out of it, you got to find ways to do it. And you've got to commit, what is it, like a couple weeks salary to do it for over the next couple of years.
You've got to get into a dance with the process that you want to learn about. And when you put energy into a process daily, it teaches you. And it never teaches you unless you put energy in. And most of what you learn is from mistakes that become brilliant solutions years later. But you have to do exactly what Ted, you have to work with it. You can't talk about it. There's no easy button.
Yeah, it's like being in film school. You're not going to go out with an Alexa first day, but you need to learn the tools. So if you're into 360 video, all you have to do is get yourself a little tiny camera that fits on top, get yourself an Adobe, subscription, and you're off and cutting, and now you're a 360 videographer and producer.
And I'd like to add, just in the context of cinema and location-based entertainment in general, it's evolving rapidly. I mean, we're talking about screens that are changing, different headsets, controllers. Nobody knows what the future of your hand gesture tracking is going to be. Audio, use of audio both on individual headsets and in groups. Now's the time for a lot of experimentation. And you might end up creating new markets through an experiment. All done? So we are officially at 30 minutes. So thank the panel. Thank you.